men who have sold donated sperm and gave permission for the child to contact you at 18. What is your story? I was donor conceived. I took a DNA test. His natural born daughter took a DNA test. So really neither of us gave permission. There are 28 siblings so far. It was quite a shock. I was not expecting it and did not know. I was 38. I have met the donor and most of the half siblings. He is a cool guy. I think it is eerie how I see many of my mannerisms in him and the other siblings. I know there is a wide range of emotions for people who experience this sort of thing, but for me, it was generally positive. Obligatory not me, but I do not think I will get another chance to tell the story. An ex-girlfriend of mine has an uncle who had donated sperm back in the 90s. At some point, he started reaching out to the parents of his biological children to see if they wanted to meet their bio dad, and now, every summer, he flies out all the children who wanted to be in contact to Yosemite, CA for a week of camping. I remember the first, and only, time I went I was shocked to know that at least 10 of his children come every year from all around the USA to spend time with him for a week. Apparently, the year I went with them was also the year that another one of his bio children got in contact with the uncle for the first time and spent the week out near Yosemite with all of her half-brothers sisters. I do not keep in contact with the uncle or my ex anymore, but I can assume that more of his children have contacted him each year so they can spend time getting to know their bio dad. At my job we did a media interview with a guy who donated sperm at least once a month for the money throughout most of his 20s, nearly 10 years. He recently found out that there is a Facebook group with over 100 women from all over the world that have had children from his donated sperm. This was an interview about his whole story, not a job interview, where it just randomly came up. It was for an internal video made for TV executives and writers to potentially create a TV show based off his story. Somewhat related, but I've got a brother from another mother and have a happy story to share. My dad had a kid with a lady in the 80s. She didn't want to keep it, and he didn't want to be a single dad, so he was put up for adoption, and they split up and go about their days. There's likely a lot more to the story, but I've only ever been told my dad's side, so I will leave it at that. Fast forward 30 years. My dad has settled down and now has a family of 5 kids with my mom. He gets a call from a non-profit asking if he'd provide his information if his kid wants to reach out. He does, and goes about his day. Fast forward a few months, he gets a call from his son. Initially wanting to learn about possible health causes and curiosity, he ended up getting adopted by an amazing family and's doing very well for himself. He wants to come to town and meet my dad. Dad has 5 awkward conversations his kids explaining we had another brother and he was coming up to visit. Note, a running insult when we were growing up was calling each other adopted, which pissed dad off a lot, lol. Fast forward 2 weeks. There was a graduation this weekend and we are having all the family over, so it was a good time for him to come up and meet the guy. Great person. Hit it off and still are close with all the brothers. Everything worked out pretty good all things considered. He's a spitting image of dad and really great friend. His parents are amazing people as well. Really lucky to have him in my life. I'm a donor child, but the man did not give permission for me to get in touch. I have always been a bit curious, particularly as we now do the same job, but more about any family history of disease which might be relevant, although I assume nothing major, or he would not have been able to donate. I think I would have reached out when I was 19, 20, but I would not anymore if I had the choice. I call the donor my father, but my dad will always be the one who raised me and played with me and loved me, even though he died when I was young. He is the one that matters. But I'm grateful to those who donate, enabling my family to have a child without a genetic illness. Kind of similar. I was approached by my longtime childhood friend and she asked if I would be a donor for her and her wife. I agreed. And they asked if I would be okay with being in their life, to take pictures and be around so the child knows who I am, knows I'm a friend, etc. So there is no questions down the road. I agreed and it has been awesome so far. He just turned 2 and he is a tornado, I warned them, but he is loved more than most children will be. Coming from a background in psych, I figured developmentally it would be easier to be labeled as a friend and not an unknown. Questions of turmoil of where did I come from, etc. I guess we will see. I was a donor, and when this happened to me, it was okay. 4 separate offspring at various times over the course of about 6 months contacted me, all just as they turned 18 and records were open to them. It was cool for me to see pictures of them and how much they looked like me. It was also good to hear the stories from their parents of how I helped them conceive a much needed child, which I really appreciated. But that was all. A few nice, polite emails were exchanged, some kindnesses, and then we stopped emailing. I did not want or expect more. I'm just glad to know they existed and that they got to connect with their biological heritage. I supposedly, as far as the donor system estimates, have a lot more out there, but I expect these are the only ones that will contact me, since I assume most of them will want to do it as soon as they can, and all of my donations happened within an 18-month span. A few emails probably meant a lot to them, showed that you cared, but ultimately recognized that you were not their dad. I emailed my donor at 18, sent a little biography and some pictures, and said I understood he wasn't my dad, and he responded with a yeah. Never contact me again. I haven't told my wife and kids, and attached the worst, most far away picture of himself he could. There are at least 18 of us kids, most of us know each other, and the ones of us who were interested in reaching out, maybe 5 or 6 of us were super disappointed he was so rude. So from a donor kid, thanks for being kind. Don't take it personally. For a long time sperm donation was sold to the donors as totally anonymous, no one will ever come back to you, and then that all changed over the last couple decades. Many people who did it when I was younger did so with the understanding that they would never be known to their potential offspring, and it must be a little jarring to have it happen now. Not me. A friend of mine sold sperm when he was in his early 20s. He really needed the money. You can opt to stay anonymous, but get paid more if you make it possible for your identity to be revealed. He opted so any potential kids could get all of his info after they turned 18. As the years went by, he was kind of dreading getting a call or email from a kid he did not know about. Eventually he got a Facebook message from his son, who had just turned 21 or 22. They started talking. It turns out a lesbian couple used his sperm to have 2 kids, both boys. He ended up meeting them. The women are really great, and they seem like a really loving and happy family. He and his wife and kids have become friends with the 4 of them. He is really glad that he sold his sperm now because of how things turned out. Mine may seem awkward. My mum's friend's a lesbian. 10 years ago all 3 came to me and asked if I would donate. Why the heck not? Lovely people and desperate to be parents. After the second turkey-based insemination, they got pregnant. They have a beautiful little girl. I went on to have my own 2 daughters, and they then came to me 2 years ago and asked again. This time, it was a bigger decision, but my partner knew the full story and was more than happy to allow us to try a second time, which was again successful. They had a boy this time. We've spoke extensively, and we all have no issue with them knowing I'm the donor. My kids will also know when the time comes. We agreed that we would run off the whole I have no input other than biological. Obviously we won't be able to stop the whole who's my father, but we have agreed that when the time does come, they will be sat down with my own 2 children as well, and they explained that the situation of I'm not a father to them, and that it was purely to allow them to have children, and that they aren't missing out by having 2 mums rather than a mum and dad. It's hard to type out, but I'm sure you guys will get it. Thankfully, they look nothing like my own children. That could be awkward considering we live in the same neighborhood. Also, I have no attachment or need to be anything to these children. May seem horrible to say, but this was my gift to 2 amazing parents, and they are doing fantastic. I don't need to be there for them. Kind of the exact opposite. But my wife donated eggs in college. She was my GF at the time. We had to stop all sexy shenanigans while I was giving her shots to increase egg production. She donated several eggs and we never heard if any of them worked. We were supposed to be informed, so when we weren't, we assumed the worst. Fast forward 17 years. The guy we donated to gets in touch, and surprise, my wife has a clone. Now they have a great relationship. chatting and watching shows online nearly every night. It was funny telling all our friends that my wife has a long lost daughter. Lots of quizzical dog looks. Our kids now have a new big sister who will be staying with us for a few months this summer. Lesbian couple I was friends with wanted a baby, but all the donors they met were assholes. In the end I said, if you want my baby gravy, I'm fine with that. You guys know me well enough, and it is not like I want kids, so you might as well the wanted to pay me. So I just said, put 10 in the tank of my car and buy me a bag of chips. Strangely the wee boy was born on my birthday, so that is my dad's girlfriend. Me and this kid all born on the same day. A few years ago, with my ex, we broke up in our 20s and stayed good friends for another 10 years. When she was 32, she badly wanted children, but wasn't having much luck with guys. Some medical issues of hers meant she had to have kids as soon as possible. She looked through sperm donor lists, but it's slim pickings. So I agreed. It took some convincing. That was 5 years ago. I'm the fun uncle now. I help her with cash a few times, and I deposit 2k a year into his education savings account, but otherwise fairly hands off, and let them live their life, and me live mine. Bumped into a high school acquaintance when Pride Week was going on. She was in town with her wife for it, and I lived in the area. We are from a small town, so it was nice to see a friendly face, and we were chit-chatting. A few weeks later they asked if I could donate. I was on a free spirit sabbatical at the time, so I figured why not. I never wanted to raise children of my own, and they liked my genetics. We went through a clinic, and after 2 tries she got pregnant and had twins. I have only seen pictures of the children so far. I think the weirdest part afterwards was them asking if I'd be willing to donate to other friends of theirs. Apparently there is like an entire database of lesbian couples looking for donors, and my email account was flooded with requests. It is what I imagine being a pretty girl on a dating app is like. I was bombarded. Without sounding arrogant, I'm 6'4", naturally thin, blue eyes, blonde hair, graduate level education, and I do not wear glasses. A lot of inquiries. It was too much, and a few people I reached out to were very pushy and requesting things like I come fly to their house in Washington to do home insemination because they did not want to pay for a clinic, or some requesting I meet up and hook up with them, and they did tell their kid it was some dude they met on vacation, or even some requesting I stick around to act as a co-parent cool uncle. I have not donated since, and I think the satisfaction of 2 offspring is enough for me now. My younger bro donated multiple times unbeknownst to me. Years later my wife and I did Ancestry.com to get an idea of how diverse our backgrounds were, and wham, started getting contacted by lots of people, over a dozen, saying we were close relatives. At first I was confused and asked the early ones about their parentage. They all had a similar stories. Single mom went to a sperm bank. Did not take long to guess what happened. Call my brothers and asked. Younger one fessed up and said yes, he went multiple times. In fact they told him he had to stop donating because there was a statistical probability his progeny could meet and date, at least they seemed ethical. I asked if it was okay if I gave them his contact. He was fine with it. The weird thing is that they all had his face, like one look at them, and it was obvious who their father was. Anyway, this went on for a couple of years and they all connected with each other. Seems there is over 20 now. Probably more. He has met a couple of them, but it was all casual. The whole thing is super weird to the rest of family to have all these close relatives who somehow are part of the family, but then again not really. You would be surprised by how much genes incorporate into your lifestyle and even mannerisms. I met my biological father when I was 25 after never meeting or seeing him my whole life. The little things were so weird. We sat in a chair the same way. We nervously bit the skin next to our fingernails at the same time. The first drink I ever ordered was a White Russian because I thought it was interesting. Lo and behold, when we met, he and his family bring White Russians to the lake because it is their favorite drink. I have kept a $2 bill in my wallet since I was 14 for no reason at all. After we talked, he has had a $2 bill in his wallet since he was a kid too. Just really weird things, coincidences. I learned in my 30s my brother and I were sperm donor conceived via the same donor before I even met him. Seeing his Facebook pictures blew my mind. I'd never really resembled anyone in my family who raised me. My brother looks like my mother, and figured I must take after older ancestors. When I found my biological father's profile, I saw my face staring back at me. When I met him, I learned he shares some of the same hobbies as us that were never explored with our social family. My uncle, who has been happily married to my other uncle for years, got one of those ancestry DNA tests as a gift. I guess it said something like you have one sister and one niece who has taken the test, as well as your son. Hold up. So my uncle had donated sperm when he was in medical school 20 plus years ago and found out he had a son through the test. They contacted each other and had a nice lunch together, and that was it. I have a friend who was raised by 2 lesbians, but conceived by a turkey-based party, which, if you do not know what that is, I did not either. Apparently sometime in the early 80s, a bunch of LGBTQ folk wanting kids all met somewhere in a New York apartment. The men, as there are multiple, all ejaculated into a receptacle of some kind, perhaps a turkey baster, and that product was then inserted into one of the female partners with the hope they would get pregnant. His mom used to share this story with us a lot while under the influence as we grew up. At some point, when he hit about 23ish, he did in fact attempt to find his biological dad because he needed to know some things about his genetic health that could really only be answered if he knew the other half. And what we came to was essentially a who knows thanks to this. Apparently it would have been possible to maybe get a genetics test, but also apparently, at that point on history at least, a very good chance that incredibly expensive route does not lead anywhere. So he's fine just not knowing. Least last time I heard from him. Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing for more videos.